Hi, I'm Karen Tax, an executive coach and creator of the IMX True Self Leadership Approach. I put together this video because many of my clients are wanting to have conversations with their employees about Black Lives Matter and other challenging topics. The opportunity, as I see it with these kinds of conversations, is to open your mind to something new that you didn't know before about a person or situation, which will, if you let it, open you to something new in yourself and the world we live in. Like maybe finding out a colleague has been fighting depression and they wanted to let people know, but they were too afraid to speak up. Knowing that kind of difficult situation can change so much for everyone if you allow it. Ignore it and things could get worse. But how can you navigate uncomfortable conversations and do what's useful and right for everyone, including you and your organization? My intention with this video is to provide information and tools that support you, leaders, coaches, regular people in workplaces, in creating generative conversations where you engage in challenging topics in ways that lead to new possibilities and concrete actions that create experiences that work for everyone. Please take in the information in this video as you can. Pause and take notes and rewatch sections as needed. There is a lot here. Critical information needed to navigate the challenges and uncertainties of our times. And creating experiences that work for everyone is worth digging into, especially now. There's a lot that can go wrong when discussing challenging topics, and too often people end up without their needs being met, thinking, but what about me? Our default ways of relating tend to be either overly polite or confrontational, where we either go along to get along or dominate each other. We often create winners and losers in how we interact, sometimes by asking for sacrifice or compromise. But this doesn't work when significant groups of people lose their health, their livelihood, opportunity for greater success, and equal voice at the table as decisions are being made. If you know how to go into challenging situations as a true self leader, and everyone can be a true self leader, you have the opportunity to be receptive to something new, while at the same time you're able to stay in integrity with your authentic truths. As true self leaders, my truth brings out your truth and vice versa. And in this way, we can create situations that ultimately work for everyone. When I'm being a true self leader, knowing who I am becomes a multiplier for your I am and vice versa. My I am and your I am generates I am X. 1 + 1 results in way more than 2. Generative, authentic, and supportive interactions with Omni-win results, where everyone can experience a win. Differences lead to creative ideas, new possibilities, unlimited in their potential and results. Examples of this include like improv jazz, or the ways I worked when I was an open source programmer, where we shamelessly riffed off of each other's code. Generative ways of working happen when unique individuals come together, bringing their diverse gifts and perspectives, aligned in a groove, in service to a common purpose. Creating Omni-win experiences and outcomes requires that you know yourself and be with each other, seeking out that generative collective groove, especially when things are uncomfortable and challenging. Getting into this generative groove requires two things. First, being generous with your time, attention, talent, and willingness to learn. And two, being curious and open with what's emerging that is new, unexpected, and especially curious about the most challenging situations we face. Being generous, curious, and open are skills most people can learn. You'll be bringing your experience, knowledge, skills, and talents to the situation, things that are comfortable, familiar, and precious to you. And creating Omni-win results with generative conversations also requires you to be willing and able to play at the edge of what you know and who you know yourself to be. Territory that is uncomfortable for most people. Given that we're living in a time of unprecedented uncertainty, where it's hard to know what's true, what's real, and what to do with so many different perspectives, it's critical to be both certain about what we know and able to navigate what we don't know, another edge, with creativity and courage. Generative conversations require confidence in yourself and a willingness to be influenced and changed by others. Interestingly, working your edges in generative conversations can be used to build confidence in yourself if you have a strong enough personal foundation to start from. I'll talk more in a bit about what's needed for a strong personal foundation. But first, it's important to know what we're going for, because there are challenging topics we've been avoiding for a long time, and we need motivation to get through the tough spots. While I'm heartbroken about the suffering created by the difficulties of our times, I've experienced painful personal loss myself. I'm also excited because I've been able to create many Omni-win experiences with immediate family, friends, and clients. The key is not having all the answers or formulas for success, but instead having confidence and faith in our ability to navigate difficult situations by being generous, willing to learn, curious, and open in conversations together. These skilled ways of relating are what will bring us into what some of us are calling the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, as described by the author Charles Eisenstein. I know these are crazy and confusing times. I suppose we could just fight it out, winners take all. But isn't there a part of you that knows in your heart that so much more is possible for all of us? Results that work for everyone cannot happen when you take a pass on discussing a challenging topic. Your voice must be a part of the mix. Your full participation is needed as you can. We each need to decide for ourselves what our full participation will look like, and you can discover what works for you.
I'm especially passionate about doing this in our places of work because the need there for Omni-win results is usually pretty clear. So before you go into your next challenging situation, I'd love for you to have some personal foundation basics, what I'm calling true self-leadership, that will allow you to create generative conversations in all areas of your life. Now that I've talked about what's possible, I'm going to share a lot of information about how you can show up and make a difference. And some of it will be hard to take in. During all of it, I want you to keep in mind two questions. What can I do to show up generous, willing to learn, curious, and open so we can create experiences that work for everyone? And second, what are my edges? My edge of comfort, the edge of what I know, the edge of who I know myself to be, that I need to pay attention to so I can become more generous.
Let's start by looking at how you might tend to be in a challenging situation. For example, if you show up stressed, defensive, and not able to see or hear another person's perspective, you've stopped Omni-win possibilities before you started the conversation. Yes, but this is probably obvious, and you're thinking, yeah, I show up open and curious. So let's probe a little deeper. When something challenging or different than usual happens or is said, how often do you think something like, this shouldn't be happening, or I just want to get past this, or maybe this nonsense is derailing progress, or maybe even this other person is the problem? These kinds of thoughts are so normal. They're not bad or wrong. And these thoughts show us the value judgments we tend to give to challenges and different perspectives that can make it really confusing to see and understand what's going on, or find a creative way forward that respects and honors all people and even all of life. The fact that we have value judgments when in different or difficult situations means that we're not learning from what's happening. I'm saying we because I've done it, and unless you're enlightened, you've done it too. So how do you know if you're really being open to something new? Knowing your true self will allow you to navigate when it's good for you to be open and when it's not. Yes, you heard me right. Being genuinely generous and open requires you to know when it's not good for you to be curious and open. To be a true self leader, you'll need to slow down long enough to be aware of how you're showing up. I use the graphic you're seeing here to make a distinction between two general ways we all show up: at our best and what I affectionately call drama. What's most useful about true self-leadership, and this diagram of it, is to be aware of the edges between who you are at your best, your most generous, curious, and open self, and the drama aspects of yourself, which we naturally associate with others, not ourselves. We all have both, and it's important to know why this is true. Coming into the world as an infant is overwhelming. During our first years of existence, all of us develop waves of coping that result in defense mechanisms, repression of discomfort, and separation between ourselves and others. These ways of coping cause us to group experiences into bad and good categories. bad experiences get sectioned off and repressed to reduce overwhelm. And this process naturally happens as we're developing our healthy sense of self, our identity. We create a difference between what is I and not I, which leads to 4 parts of our identity: our self-image, an other or not image, a boundary, and an emotional relation or affect that characterizes the relationship between who I am and others. You can learn more about this by looking up object relations theory. This is probably a good place to pause a moment and consider. We are all identified with our personality, a generally positive mental construct formed in the past as our self-image developed, with negative shadow parts that we associate with others. That is the basis of how we relate to others. And unless we consciously do something different, we will unconsciously relate to others from historical negative aspects of ourselves. The exciting part is knowing that when we become aware of our self-image and how we habitually defend this identity and how these defenses may no longer serve, we can open up to deeper truths about ourselves and others. We can identify more and more strongly with our best selves, learning about who we are from drama. We can learn ways of making sense of what's going on by first sorting through the internal conflict within ourselves between good and bad parts of ourselves that allows us to see others more clearly and what's going on in the world more clearly. It's at the edge of our identity between our best self and drama where we have the most leverage to either reclaim powerful parts of ourselves that we've repressed or slip into reactivity. Before we get into being able to see and deal with drama, I want to give you a sense of how knowing your true self can play out in a conversation so that you can see the practical application of what I'm sharing. There are 3 active elements in difficult conversations which come up with a specific set of questions. What happened? What are my feelings? And how does this impact my identity? And you can read more detail here on this page. Conversations can't be neatly put into these 3 categories, but are entangled for sure. How we navigate these 3 elements will determine how effective we can be in creating healthy and productive outcomes. Each element taps different parts of our brains, so trying to address all 3 can be tricky. The identity conversation is the most important one for us because it concerns the deepest unconscious parts of ourselves. Facts we are sure of can be proven right or wrong, usually, and feelings pass or move through, but our sense of self is more core material. When our identity is threatened, we enter unknown and frightening territory, so we become defended against that threat. However, we have to be willing to see and learn from drama, to acknowledge what's going on, especially when it comes to our identities. I've had experiences with clients where they say they have no drama in their lives. None. Zilch. Nada. Which is interesting because drama is a natural part of life and is required for learning and growing. Think about a child, maybe who grows up without any challenges. You can know that that child will suffer from low self-esteem because they haven't learned to deal with difficulty. The image of the wise monkeys here, showing see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, which, by the way, is thousands of years old, is a call to use discretion when speaking truths about the shadow aspects of life. An aversion to drama persists for the reasons I've shared, and this reluctance to learn from drama gets in the way of us being true to ourselves, developing resilient identities, and having generative conversations. The Johari Window shown here is a classic tool we can use to think about the unconscious parts of ourselves that we hide or don't know. What we're not willing to see, hear, or speak about, we can't acknowledge. If we're not willing to reflect, we won't see our assumptions, our beliefs, our cultural norms, our implicit biases, our attitudes, our stereotypes, until they come crashing in on us. And then we'll probably blame them on someone else. I know, I did that for a really long time. It's a tough one to learn. All of these unknown parts of ourselves impact our understanding, decisions, and actions in an unconscious way. For example, my unconscious avoidance of conflict can make it impossible to resolve conflict. When I'm willing to look at drama, I can begin to see it as a natural way life delivers opportunities to see and acknowledge things that are waiting to be seen and known. Conflict and diversity provide opportunities to reveal aspects of ourselves and each other we haven't seen before, and to enter new territories of creativity and possibility. When it comes to generative conversations, acknowledgement is key. If we can't acknowledge aspects of ourselves that we can't initially see, it's very difficult to acknowledge what's going on in the world that we can't see. For example, if I can't see the pain in me, I won't be able to see the pain in you. In fact, it's going to be the last thing I want to do. If I can't acknowledge the unconscious in me, I can't acknowledge the aspects in me that are unconsciously impacting my behavior that will come up in difficult situations. So what is it that we might be so reluctant to see within drama, within ourselves, that can make generative conversations hard or even impossible? Remember, our self-image is the parts we consciously identify with. It's the story we tell ourselves and others over and over again, built from our past history. Our positive self-image might include things like, I'm a loving and kind person, I'm smart and knowledgeable, strong and willful, capable and independent. Our identity is often built around more positive traits we ascribe to ourselves and present to the world, but we can also have negative self-images and beliefs, which could include things like, I'm weak, I'm not very smart. This is one I've had. Too intense, too bold, or too needy and independent. We don't usually present negative self-images, so they're often more in the background, unconscious, or sometimes pushed over the self-boundary, so me and other, projected onto others. Sometimes positive identity aspects are an overcompensation, defense against painful negative aspects of ourselves. What we can perceive, our range of actions, futures we can imagine for ourselves and in the world, depend on these ideas we have about ourselves. So when we say, that's just not me, okay, we're limiting what we see as possible by how we see ourselves. We stop new possibilities from happening when we don't explore ways to expand who we know ourselves to be. When we don't know how to deal with our threatened identity, we don't know how to deal with opportunities to step into the unknown, to see a new perspective, to create something new and different. It's important to remember our tendency as humans to defend our identity and personality, especially in social interactions. Defending without reflecting and being open to new aspects of who we are keeps us on shaky ground when it comes to true self-understanding and leadership. We're shaky and not confident about our true selves because of internal conflict between positive and negative best self and drama aspects of who we are. Consider how you might have an identity of being kind and feeling or expressing anger or hatred. How could both of these emotions fit in your identity? Can you be confident, identified with your developed intellect or being an expert, and say, I don't know, and be open to another's perspective? Do you believe you have to fight for everything by being strong and willful? Is this the only way? What is your relationship to feelings of weakness or vulnerability? How much can you empathize with people in need of support? Do you pride yourself maybe on being autonomous and independent? And why? Do you believe you have to do everything alone, that you can't get support? How easily can you ask for help? Do you ever allow yourself to feel helpless, in need of help? To maintain a positive identity, what happens is those emotions that conflict with your positive self-image become candidates for getting pushed over the self-boundary and into how we see others and project onto them. Those people you dislike are most likely representative of your shadow parts, aspects of yourself you don't like or can't acknowledge. I know this is heavy stuff, and honestly, it's time for us to deal. I spent many years blaming my husband for things I didn't like, clearly avoiding stuff I wasn't dealing with in myself. If I can deal, so can you. My goal with this video is to make sure you are prepared to learn and grow in generative conversations that create outcomes that work for everyone. So I'm going to keep going with information that I think is critical for this to happen. If you've taken my Define Your True Self course, you'll recognize the information on this graphic, which is a continuation of the internal conflict I just shared about. From the perspective of your best self, you tend to see and experience win-win possibilities. People think like you and act like you in this territory, so they're good people, and it's easier to all get along. From the perspective of drama, you tend to see and experience win-lose dynamics. Differences are uncomfortable, frustrating, annoying, and even downright threatening. Now, I know that some people truly believe that everyone thinking like them is the key we need to proceed so we can all get along. But I'm thinking that's just because of people not knowing what's possible. Really, we can be so much more creative, resourceful, and productive when we're not all trying to be the same. It helps to know that win-lose dynamics are a direct result of our early development in life, where we categorize the things into good and bad. and associate bad with others. There are many other cultural and societal influences of good-bad thinking that I'm not going into here. So you can think of our early development as a root cause. It's important to understand the differences between these territories, because when drama unconsciously influences our conversations and interactions, you'll hear expressions like, "You're either for me or against me," because a different perspective means you're an enemy. Or, "You made me angry," where instead of taking responsibility for your own anger, you blame it on others. Or maybe you set a boundary with, "No, I won't accept this," and "Yes, I'm happy to do that." And people can only hear the no. Or you offer feedback and people attach a value judgment and think you're saying they're a bad person. This is all normal behavior that happens, right? In conversations with my husband, I've learned to see when he feels judged, and I make sure I've separated out value judgments I have and more clearly share my perspective, so we step out of win-lose dynamics. Omni-win or win-win experiences are possible when we learn to navigate the edges between our best selves and drama. We can then see win-lose or scarcity dynamics that come from thinking either I get what I want or you will. Thinking that originates with either you're good or bad and value judgments, right? So if you're unconsciously going into conversation with these dynamics at play inside of you, you're walking into a battle before it's even started. Generative outcomes are not possible in this either-or territory. I very much want you to understand how win-lose dynamics are hanging out inside of you so you can get curious about what's going on in you and discover your capacity to be more generous, both with yourself and others, ultimately moving into Omni-win dynamics. Remember that there are 4 parts to our identity: our self-image, the other or not I image, a boundary, and an emotional relation or affect that characterizes the relationship between who I am and others. I've touched on all 4 parts, and I want to dive into the topic of identity and power, because this is another foundational piece of true self-leadership. Most of us gave up feeling powerful in our early years to stay connected to our caregivers or to fit in with peers. We give up power to fit in. Otherwise, the relationships would be threatened. We come to be identified with a self-image of not having power, developing shadow parts related to power. This treatment of power results in seeing people with power as all bad and powerless people as victims and all good. When we're identified with being a good person, it creates an internal conflict with feelings or being powerful. Power gets projected onto others, so our image of being a good person can remain intact. This way of handling power cuts us off from our own power that is needed to be true to ourselves, to be in integrity with personal truths, to be clear about our values, to be confident in our strengths and aware of our weaknesses, and to be courageous in our motivations and purpose in life. Cutting off our personal power cuts us off from our voice, our value, and our volition. Between the poles of myself and other in object relations theory lies the affect, the energetic charge or emotion that connects two people. This connection can be a pull toward or a rejection of respect, hatred, admiration, fear. In the case of the object relations associated with power, fear or hatred of powerful individuals is common, depending on our personal history and our personalities. In my experience, most people are highly ambivalent, if not averse to power. And that gets in the way of our ability to be genuinely and confidently generous, open, and curious in our interpersonal relationships. As a true self-leader, you develop the skills to know yourself at your best, to reclaim parts of yourself lost in the shadows of drama. True self-leadership allows you to lead from your best and learn from drama so that you can see the best in others and navigate drama between the two of you. In this way, my I am amplifies your I am and vice versa, and the generative synergies of I am X get cooking. Drama. Beautiful human drama can either become the boundary between self and other, or if we let it, it can be the portal in to deep connection with each other. We get to choose either continued separation or connection. When past painful memories get activated, people sometimes say they're triggered. This can happen when our identity is threatened or when an other relates to us in a way that doesn't make us feel seen or heard. A disconnect happens between the understanding of who we think we are, our identity, and who others believe we are, and separation is reinforced. When you're triggered, you regress into childhood and see the world through past self and other relations, with a sea of drama in between us. You fall out of being adult, knowing your true self, and often act like a child again, if it's just going into avoidance or collapse maybe. Then emotions, when you're activated, have control over you instead of you having emotions that you're in charge of. Being with your family of origin is often the most humbling when it comes to shadow activation. It certainly has been for me. An activation of shadow can show up as an irrationally intense and often instant dislike towards someone. You might say something like, I saw red, or I lost it with her, or she made me feel enraged. Yes, we've lost it when our shadow is activated. And what we're losing is our agency and clarity, our ability to be connected with our growing and evolving identity. There's usually a strong felt sense of rejection or a specific quality about another person that you can't stand. That's the thing that hooks us. With family, you may know you still love the person, but can't get past abhorring them because they're such a terrible human being. Remember the boundary between self and others, where we split aspects of ourselves into all good and all bad. That's what's at play here. The thing we abhor in another is the thing we abhor in ourselves, but can't yet face. Not yet. Shadow activation can also come from positive, disowned parts of ourselves. That happens when we got the message in childhood to downplay a positive quality. A fear of outshining others is an example, which can cause us to split or repress positive parts of ourselves. We'd rather fit in and stay connected than be too smart, creative, or even loving. This boundary between self and other, the choice between separation and connection, the divisiveness and polarization that's happening in the world is a reflection of how this internal conflict is playing out within each and every one of us. We can keep blaming the media or the other political party or whoever your favorite evil villain is. You can choose that. You can also experiment and play around with healing and reclaiming the shadow parts of yourself and discover how much more connected to yourself and your power and others you can be. Healthy development that includes integration of shadow parts brings us to a place of liberation from historical conditioning and reactivity. It improves our ability to perceive reality and clearly see possibility. Whew, yeah, there's a lot of information here on this page. The emotions that can be at play in shadow activation can be varied and complex and deeply painful. If we're going to realize the most robust and resilient aspects of our best selves, we'll need to be with our emotions. Not all at once, for sure, but as they come up. If you're feeling feelings, please don't blame them on someone else. When they come up, it means that you're being given an opportunity for healing. Also, it's critical to know that there are an awful lot of people carrying around an unbearable amount of trauma. If that's you, please get support however you can. If you're in a situation where you can get professional help, consider yourself privileged and use that privilege to get help. I'm sharing this information because I want to acknowledge that everyone is dealing with different amounts of hurt and emotions. It's a part of the human experience. So having compassion for yourself and others is so important. For you to enter into generative conversations in a healthy way, it's important for you to take extra good care of yourself and your emotions so that you can show up generous, curious, and open, relaxed, and confident. And when you do get triggered, not if, but when, know that you can handle it, especially if you have some support. There are 4 fundamental and basic ways you need to know your true self. Your mental intelligence, which includes thinking, assumptions, decisions, healthy boundaries, and power. Your spiritual intelligence, which includes your truth about what is so, perception, purpose, possibility, and authenticity. Your emotional intelligence, which includes your feelings, empathy, courage, connection, love. Emotional intelligence is so much more than just feelings. And your physical intelligence, which includes your body, actions, the systems that you use, your environment, learning, and developing wisdom that goes well beyond just thinking. All of these intelligences and more are needed to discern and perceive and receive and know what's happening and more importantly, move into not knowing, which is where we need to go to solve the currently unsolvable challenges of our times. Tapping into your wholeness via your multiple intelligences gives you a strong sense of your best self, agency to be in charge of yourself, and the ability to more easily be with the discomfort of drama, to learn, heal, and grow from it. And in the process, you'll expand your capacity to be at your best. Learning, healing, and growing with the natural drama of life is a process of reconnecting with your whole self, the mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical aspects of who you are. One of the biggest challenges in difficult conversations or situations is knowing when you've been triggered or you've moved into the territory of drama. When I started being more self-aware, it first took years before I would be aware of shadow activation. It built up into an avalanche of problems early in my life. With support, it became months and then days before I'd realize what was going on inside of me. With practice, I've mostly learned to be aware in the moment. This graphic can give you an idea of how shadow activation can happen from different aspects of your wholeness. For example, when I start having a lot of negative thoughts, I know I'm either tired and need rest, or I need food or some kind of self-care. So I can flip back into being my best self. I can get activated with sadness and collapse into some depression and retreat when I feel disconnected. When that happens, I tend to emotions that I need to feel and allow that energy to move. I never force myself to feel happy. It happens naturally as emotions flow, and you might need some support or medication if you have a buildup of unfelt emotions. And we have a long way to go to be healthy with our emotions in our society, at least in Western society, and medication can be a critical support. One of the most powerful ways to be aware of shadow activation is to notice what's happening in your body. When a sympathetic nervous system response happens in your body, you'll feel tense and contracted. Your breath might become shallow, and you'll typically get a shot of stress hormones coursing through your body. Adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine are the primary three, which provide short bursts of unsustainable energy. Drinking coffee in the morning and alcohol at night is part of a stress cycle that indicates an addiction to these hormones that are often involved in chronic health issues. It's impossible to be open and curious when our nervous system is signaling that there is a threat. So it's important to know what your reactive patterns are, the ways you seek safety and defend your agency and belonging. Flipping into a physical state of rest and digest is needed for your nervous system to shift into a calmer parasympathetic response. Moving between stress and relaxation is actually ideal for developing resilience and your best self capacity, which allows you to handle drama of all kinds with more grace and ease. A healthy diet, plenty of water, rest, being around positive people, having loving relationships, being aware of your emotions, all contribute to your ability to show up generous, curious, and open. So generative conversations and outcomes that work for everyone can happen. One of the most important practices in all of this is meditation and mindfulness, which develops your capacity to be aware of all that's going on in your mind, energy, emotions, and body, and also be aware of others. There's no more important practice to develop the presence that is needed to define your true self and lead from your best self while you also learn from drama. Setting boundaries is critical when navigating the territories of your true self. If you just stay within the territory of your best self, never venturing into drama, you'll be comfy cozy, but not learning and growing. If you get too far out into drama, to the point that hurt is triggered, you'll eventually get past the point where you can be receptive and take in new information and learn. This is the panic zone, and in the middle is your stretch zone. Only you can know the territory of your safety zones. And it's critical to learn how to set boundaries to manage your safety zones. Learn what you need to say no to and what you can say yes to as you're in challenging situations. You can ask for what you need to feel safe in challenging conversations. You'll learn what boundaries you need to set through experience, and you'll build courage, resilience, and awareness of your true self through experience. Okay, I know there's a lot of information on this page, and I wanted to give you enough guidance to feel generous in challenging conversations, especially about race. I recently took a course called, wonderful course, How to Talk About Race, and they provided much of this information, which I've adapted to a corporate audience. This material was developed specifically to guide white people in having conversations where the speaker is a person of color. And this information will be useful in having generative conversations of all kinds. Notice that who you're being, what part of you you're listening from, is what's important. Listening from drama aspects of yourself shuts down generative conversations. If you see yourself in drama listening, make sure you get help from someone who can help you with your needs so you can show up listening as your best self. It's also helpful to understand the difference between debate and dialogue in conversations, so I've included that information here. When it comes to true self-leadership and generative conversations, I like to look at drama as our humanity, as those tender parts of ourselves that we've learned to protect and defend and avoid. There's good reason we've developed avoidance habits. As I've talked about, we're avoiding pain or uncomfortable emotions. And as we do that, we're also avoiding our healing and our learning. Remember to tend to your safety zones, and it can help you move into your stretch zone to know some of the very human ways we all avoid learning, which are listed here. If you see that you've done some of these things on this page, you're in really good company. We all have in one way or another. And that more beautiful world our hearts know is possible is waiting for more and more people to stretch into learning. You can cultivate ways to make generative conversations easier. The more you have them, the easier they'll get. I've gone from being terrified of others being upset with me in challenging situations to experiencing them as sacred healing work. I've learned to ride the waves of being triggered and have them be powerful experiences of healing and growth. I can't emphasize enough how important the first bullet here is. Please take care of you. You must tend to yourself first so you can show up generous for others. And this work usually requires help. Don't hesitate to get help. Most people need someone else to help with the emotional layers of drama. This is some of the most important work you'll ever do. You can develop these skills to have generous conversations, small steps at a time. It's also important to know that you will make mistakes. You will misstep and do harm in difficult situations. It's a part of being human, which is messy. Instead of trying to be perfect, it's better to have confidence that you can navigate drama and know that everyone can benefit from the process. Ultimately, generative conversations or similar approaches are the only way to create Omni-win experiences that honor and respect the vast diversity of our humanity. Having a protocol to repair harm done is needed as we bump along being human with each other. I found the process of own, apologize, and repair useful in reconciling harm done, when others are also aware of this process. Repair and healing is always possible if people are willing to learn how. My intention with this video was to provide information and tools that support you in creating generative conversations where you engage in challenging topics and ways that lead to new possibilities and concrete actions. If you've made it this far through my video, then you're a true warrior for new experiences that work for everyone, starting with you, and I'm grateful for that. I've included a summary of concrete actions and tools that I've covered so that you can see them in one place. Remember, please, to explore and discover what works for you. Don't do anything I've shared in this video because I said so. Do it because you are willing to learn and heal and grow and take care of yourself in this way. Please strive for balance and wholeness. We're not going to only think our way out of the challenges we're facing. Alignment with your head, heart, and intuition. This is what will take us someplace new. Connect with your whole self, with others, with the world around you, and nature, where there is wisdom, natural rhythms, and a generative groove ready to nourish us all. As our world gets more confusing and we try to discern what's true and trustworthy and real, and we navigate a way forward, exploring what might work for everyone. One of the biggest challenges I see us facing is, how do we include so many different perspectives in the process? And I can say with absolute certainty, I don't know. What I do know is that I've been on my own true self journey and seen that I'm having more and more experiences of synchronicity and confirmation of the path I'm on, and interactions with others that more and more are inclusive and creative. We're seeing so many things that we didn't see as possible before, but it's only happening as we come together, taking the actions and using the tools I've shared here. I have no doubt in my mind that we are finding our way with lots of guidance to the more beautiful worlds our hearts know is possible. This quote from Rumi holds one of the keys. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. If you'd like to meet me and others in the field beyond wrongdoing and right doing, I'd love to talk with you. You can find ways to personally connect with me at theiamway.com. I've talked a lot about true self-leadership in this video, and if you'd like to learn more about being a true self-leader, you can check out the same website, theiamway.com. You'll find lots of resources there, specifically in the courses menu option. My Define Your True Self course will guide you in building your true self capacity for generative conversations, and there's lots of free stuff in the blog. Thank you so much for taking in the information in this video. May there be many of us having generative conversations, creating a world that works for everyone.